I was actually at the University of Massachusetts Amherst on Wednesday, just hours after that encampment was violently repressed by Massachusetts state troopers. And now I'm back in studio and I'm here with award-winning Canadian journalist Aaron Mate. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, Max. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you're watching us live or later on, whenever it is. Max, how was your speech at UMass?
Well, it was packed, and although a lot of students couldn't be there because they were recovering from the night before, and many of the students that were there had languished in jail for over 6 hours and were zip tied the whole time. I was told, students were not allowed to, the protesters were not allowed to use the bathroom at any point. Women who had to change their tampons weren't allowed to. And the police sort of were taunting them and taking some joy in being able to kind of like hold them in a uncomfortable position, to put it mildly. But they knew that that was the price of what they were doing, that they were engaging in civil disobedience, and that the school, the chancellor, like all these other chancellors, was operating in bad faith and was obviously sort of being pushed by more powerful forces than himself. Their chancellor is like the chancellor at Columbia, Manu Shafiq, sort of a new person who has no idea what they've gotten themselves into. And so it was a momentous event, a momentous time to be there. And, I just talked about all the various forces that have been exposed and unmasked through this campus-wide rebellion. And I mean, the great unmasking continues, but I just, my thesis or speech was just about how all of our elite institutions have been unmasked since October 7th. And it'll be online, I guess. We'll post it at the Grayzone, so stay posted for that. This is what happened at UMass, by the way. It was extremely violent. The students we're not really doing anything except sitting there. Replay that. So, yeah, I mean, by the time I got there, the entire main lawn at UMass had been cleared out. All the tents had been completely cleared out. There was no sign of any protest. Students were collecting their caps and gowns, and everyone was wondering why they did this just 2 days before graduation. I mean, when graduation takes place, and then they weren't blocking the commencement ceremony in any way. When it takes place, the semester ends, and this was likely going to peter out or turn into something else, maybe on a more national basis. So why did the chancellor feel compelled to order this level of force, to allow these these armored riot police onto campus? That's sort of the mystery. And the students that I spoke to student reporters from the school paper who said they were unable to get any answers out of the administration, but that the trustees made this decision. And it's, the trustees who are the front people for the major business interests that use campuses like UMass as basically a front for massive investments. I should also say I spoke to a student who is heavily involved in the Columbia University encampment, who said that one of their main demands was simply transparency, that the school provide a list of what its investments are, and that they refused. So there's been no good faith negotiating between the administrations and the students. There's been no transparency, and it's unmasked these universities as basically not centers of learning, but centers of finance and investment for alumni in giant weapons companies. And I mean, look at who the trustees are. This was a good graphic that the Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine pulled together. about two key trustees there who are guiding Manouche Shafiq's decisions. One of them is Victor Mendelsohn, the co-president of HEICO Corporation, which has contracts with the U.S. Department of Defense. And Mendelsohn has strong ties to Israel, which he's made clear through his affiliations with Zionist organizations, his donations to pro-Israel candidates, and his atrocious management of HEICO Corporation. And then we have someone who might be more familiar to Americans, Che Johnson, who's on the board of Lockheed Martin while he is a Columbia trustee. And it's Johnson who is said to be helping to manage or serve as sort of a liaison between Shafiq and her administration and the various law enforcement agencies which were brought onto campus to haul students off.
And he's also close with the Biden team because he served in the Obama White House as Department of Homeland Security Secretary.
Exactly. Yeah, he was the head of the DHS, which was a product of all of his years in and out of the national security state. So that's sort of like what the students are up against. And they're doing a great job of exposing what the American university is truly about. New development here in Washington, D.C., where I'm sitting. The George Washington University Gaza encampment was cleared out last night. They had actually been cleared out in the morning, and they moved their tents quickly to a new location. And this is what it looked like.
Moved back to absolutely nobody. There's a few journalists.
This is the Metropolitan Police Department of Muriel Bowser actually staging their own march after clearing the encampment out. You can see how many of them there are. This is journalist Ford Fisher.
There's a few journalists here, but the protesters largely retreated about a block. So the police are kind of just practicing saying back to nobody.
Sort of a insane show of deterrence there. They look really excited, enthusiastic. So like the background to this is that, and I've been able to visit the GW encampment. It's really orderly. It annoys right-wingers and Zionists and so on, but it's been orderly. There haven't been really any criminal incidents there, any acts of illegal behavior. But Muriel Bowser, the DC mayor, who is actually a mentee of Michael Bloomberg sort of coached her to be mayor. She was about to testify before the House GOP about rising anti-Semitism hours before she ordered this crackdown. So that's really what it's about, is basically you have a Democratic mayor who a few years ago ushered in Black Lives Matter Way near where the Black Lives Matter protests took root in Washington, D.C., taking de facto orders from Mike Johnson and the House Republicans on cracking down on student protesters in her own city. And of course, those House Republicans are tools of Israel who have received millions of dollars in legal bribery from AIPAC. And this is the inevitable result. Journalists were arrested here. Several students were arrested. And you can see they have their batons out. They're threatening extreme violence. So the students decided to retreat rather than just get their brains beaten in.
In 2014, when Black Lives Matter really emerged, there was a real hostility towards BLM because they had this national platform that was really strong on Palestine. And there was a real reluctance from, the establishment to accept them accordingly. And then in 2020, that kind of got watered down a little bit as the Biden campaign used BLM to get out the vote. And you could see also at the same time there was still a strong element of pro-Palestine, but you could see there that they were trying to water that down. And Muriel Bowser is like the perfect product of that. It's crazy she can inaugurate a Black Lives Matter square and then go on to crack down on pro-Palestinian demonstrators.
Well, it shows who really threatens the system and who doesn't. The Black Lives Matter became the current thing and was given sort of license to protest during the height of the COVID lockdowns. The Washington Post consulted experts for a front page report on how racism was actually a viral disease. And so these protests were necessary, even though everybody else was locked down, because Donald Trump was president and they were going to make Trump look like the arch racist. Trump completely played into it, as I showed, being underneath it wasn't an Apache helicopter, but a military transport helicopter was sent in on those BLM protests in Washington, D.C., like a few nights in, and as a means of just intimidating the protesters. And it was really shocking to have that helicopter just like 100 feet overhead while cops were shooting beanbags at us. But ultimately the protest, the Democrats got behind him and supported it. Maxine Waters said, we need to push, you got to push harder. And it was a really convenient instrument for at least creating chaos under Donald Trump. Joe Biden's president. These don't serve the Democrats in any way. So they have to all be cleared out most of them before graduation. I mean, there are consequences to this. UMass's commencement speaker is refusing to speak. USC, University of Southern California, where a valedictorian, was blocked because pro-Israel groups protested. She was a hijabi Muslim who was likely going to denounce Israel's genocide in a pretty articulate way. USC can't even hold its graduation. It's had to its commencement ceremonies. It's had to split up commencement ceremonies. And one of the few speakers who is agreeing to speak out of all the celebrities they invited is someone who might be familiar to this show, Sean Penn. He's speaking for USC's medical school. Linda Thomas Greenfield, this is great. Linda Thomas Greenfield has been blocked not just from one, but two commencement ceremonies. She was the person that was sent up by the Biden administration to veto several ceasefire resolutions to ensure that genocide could continue. So there is a huge backlash still taking place, even though these encampments are being broken up.